Brothers.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It's actually election day uh, here in the country, and just want to encourage everyone to go vote. Thank you all for being here. It's the first Tuesday of November as well. And if you are new to our program, welcome. Thank you for being here on behalf of the Emory Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. We bring you greetings on behalf of our research center. For those who are new, again, we thank you for being here. We want to help you understand what you are participating in today. So if this is your second time joining our webinar, this is a little different from last week, only that since March of 2020, we've been hosting a weekly program titled BrainTalk Live. And so that is the Tuesday session every Tuesday at 2 p.m. where we bring you all things related to health and aging. We try our best to feature as many of our Emory experts as we can, and we always begin with an exercise demonstration because what we say is what's good for your heart is good for your brain. And so we want to be mindful of people who may be inactive because of the pandemic. So we're going to bring John on shortly to do a exercise demonstration with us. Remember to participate at your own risk, okay? He keeps us going, he gets our hearts moving, and all before we dive into this great content. So after John today, you're going to hear from Dr. Monica Parker. A lot of you sent in your questions last week, and so we're just going to do a recap of Dementia and Alzheimer's 101 so that we can again lay the groundwork so that we're all on the same page when it comes to understanding risk factors and a proper diagnosis for Alzheimer's. You can also use the Q&A and the chat function if you have questions. We'll be able to address those as best we can. And we have another special guest, Amy Rosen. She is a certified genetic counselor. A lot of you ask questions about genetics and am I at risk? If my mom or dad had it, what are the chances of me getting Alzheimer's? So we're going to talk about all that today. Then Matt Doiron with our Cognitive Empowerment program is going to come on and tell you what you can expect for our 3 o'clock program with our Cognitive Empowerment program at 3 p.m. today. Okay? That's a lot. I see some people have already posted questions in the Q&A. I hope you checked your email. I did upload last week's 2-hour session to our YouTube channel. So without any further ado, John's going to come on. He's going to spend a good 10 minutes getting us going. We want everyone to participate, and then we're going to turn it over to Dr. Parker and then Mrs. Amy Rosen. All right? Welcome, John.
Hey. I would like to welcome everyone to the Emory Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Today, I need you to grab a can, a ball, or a little golf or a stick, or you can use a water bottle, water bottles, cans. I'm going to show you how to massage yourself to get that circulation going, and then we're going to jump into our cardio. Okay? In 5 seconds, even if you have a spray can. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I'm going to use my stick. We're going to start at the bottom. Just a little circulation. And you just rub. Right in the calves. I need you to rub. You can do the water bottles. Good. I want the hamstrings. Let's rub. You're creating circulation. You're creating blood flow. Good. Okay, let's go with the quad. Let's go with the calves. Rub it. Any knots. We creating that blood for your brain is sending blood to that area because, hey, it's saying something is going on. Hamstrings. Rub. Good. Quads. Rub. There you go. Good. Here we go. Top of the chest. Any knots? We're just rubbing them out. Other side. Right on top of the chest. Good. I want to get the palm of your hands. And you working them shoulders. When we massaging those hands, the back of the hand. Switch. Good. Let's go. Forearm. Other side. Good. Other side. Arm up. Good. Back of the arm. Good. Here we go. Now, I want to get the side of the neck. And the shoulder. Other side. Let's go. Creating that circulation. Good. Let's get that shoulder. In front of the shoulder. On top of the shoulder. Good. Other side. In front of the shoulder. Side of the shoulder. And great. Great job. Remember, you can give yourself your own massage, you can give yourself your own stimulation, but you just gotta do it. Okay, let's get ready. We about to get this cardio in.
Feels good.
Here we go.
The world is
Come on now.
feels good.
Cardio is life.
The world is in the I don't know about you. Set Noel. I don't know about you. Spin on. I don't know about you. I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Let's go. Hey,
I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Come on. Get your leg up.
I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Come on.
I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Ready. Y'all ready? All right. Let's go.
I'm 2 + 2. I'm for soul. You down, I'm down, baby. Let's go.
Let's go.
You drop, let it roll. You twerk, you pop. You so slow. I hate me too. It's like what you know when it comes to business. I take two. It's only one life.
We
You
don't
don't
need
get
to
two.
play
So live life. Don't let it live you.
Let's go.
I got a pocket full of $100 bills.
Let's go.
Put on a jacket cause these diamonds give you chills.
Let's go.
2 shots are running, 2 starting tonight.
Come on. Get him up.
Look in the mirror, I'm like, who the hell is he?
I'm feeling good.
So many whips and cribs, I'm losing track of keys.
I'm feeling good.
Up to something.
Watch it.
I'll be alright.
Here we go.
Yeah. I'm drinking out the bottle. Get no Samuel with supermodel. Get no Samuel. I hit the lotto. I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Come on.
I don't know about you, but I
I
feel
feel
good.
good.
I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Yes.
I don't know
We're
about
gonna
you,
get this
but I feel
waistline.
good.
Get together. Y'all
I don't
ready?
know about you, but I feel good. I'm 1 + 1, so I'm too strong. If you ain't about money, then get gone. I wanna wild out all night long. You wanna ride out, then get on. I hate me too, it's like what you. And when it comes to business, I take two. It's only one life, you don't get two. So live life, don't let it live you.
I got a pocket full
I'm
of
feeling good right now.
Put on a jacket cause these diamonds
Okay,
give
y'all
you
ready?
chills. 2 shots are running.
We gonna get these hips.
I'm starting
We gonna get these hips. Y'all ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Look in the mirror, I'm like, who the hell is he?
Come on.
So many whips and cribs, I'm losing track of keys. Up to something.
Come on.
Ooh, yeah, I'll be alright.
know about you, but I feel good.
Hey!
I don't know about you, but I feel good. I don't know about you, but I feel good. I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Yes! Woo!
I don't know about you, but I feel good.
Oh man, I just want to get y'all pumped up. And I want to say to you, as cardio is life, keep your mucus down right now because we're going into our flu season. And I want to say to y'all, I'm John Lewis, and see you later. Bye. Oh, wait. If you would like to go to www.phenomzone.live for more videos, and I'm going to launch over 100 some videos for everybody's need around the world. And see you later. Bye.
All right, there you have it, everyone. That was John's official announcement of an opportunity for you to be a part of his virtual chair and aerobic exercise universe. I don't know what all it entails, but we know it's going to be amazing. So I'm going to put in the chat for you the website that he just mentioned, and I want everyone to go and visit and also just subscribe. We are so grateful to have John join us. So go to the chat. I just posted that link for you all. Thank you, thank you. Bravo to you, John. He does it all, everybody. So, all right, let's get going with today's program. I see everyone posting comments and sending chat remarks, and also just thanking John. Isn't that great that even in a virtual environment we can keep moving, we can keep our hearts up? His enthusiasm comes through the screen. So again, as the holidays unfold, we're going to be doing a lot more exercise and a little bit less on our content. We may even replay some of our highly requested speakers just to give all of our Emory experts a break during the holiday, but we want to remain in touch with you all. So we'll be having a little trivia, some live music performances, and of course, John's going to be on getting our hearts going. So stay active, stay moving. Now, do you have a pen and paper so you can take notes? Because Dr. Parker is here and she's ready to have a review for some, but also highlight some important information for others who just need a little bit more clarification about Alzheimer's and dementia. Welcome, Dr. Parker.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again on BrainTalk Live. Last week, we had more than 30% of our attendees who were brand new to the Boisweta Brain Health Center and our BrainTalk Live, and so there were lots of basic questions about Alzheimer's. I want to remind everybody that we do this to keep in touch with you, to make you aware of an opportunity to participate in our clinical research here. We are looking a lot of times for people who are obviously healthy, nothing appears to be wrong with them. And longitudinally, we want to, which means over time, we want to follow you to make sure that your memory is still working as well tomorrow as it is today. So one of the things, we're going to be giving you some numbers. Crystal Davis is one of our intake persons for all of our research, as is, I can't remember that we have a new coordinator now for overall intake. But every study that's presented here has a specific coordinator. If you can't figure out who it is, we're going to put in the chat exactly who it is you're supposed to call if you're interested in a particular study or any of the particular studies at this point. Cornelia, I'm ready.
Okay, can you see the screen?
It says Cornelia has started screen sharing, but nothing's on it. It's stuck, she says. Let's see. Do you want me to, okay, so, again, We are in the business of studying Alzheimer's and related dementias, and a lot of times to basically get a good understanding of what's actually going on with somebody, we need to see them when they're healthy, follow how their brain is functioning from the time they're healthy to the time that they're not so healthy. Okay, Cornelya, nothing's going on. Do you want me to just use I have to bring it up, but I can bring it up. Cornelya? No.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and I'll give you control to share your deck. If I'm having difficulty.
Request remote control.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to, yep, you have it now?
There's nothing on there. Okay. Crystal? We're sorry. We'll get it down. Okay, John Lewis's link is www.phenonozone.live. John Lewis's link is www.phenonozone.live. Okay. Okay. There are a lot of questions in the chat about what you should do to prevent Alzheimer's, but I think the most important thing that we want you to stress is one of the most important preventive strategies is to keep physically healthy. Physically healthy means that if you have high blood pressure, manage it and control it. If you have diabetes, manage it and control it. If you're not exercising, exercise. Get about 150 minutes in a week. Some of the questions are, what are the genetics? And Dr. Amy Rosen is going to go over the genetics of Alzheimer's and how that plays into this. Under top right screen view, always swap that may help. Not quite sure what's going on, folks, but just bear with us.
Do you want me to try one more time?
Yeah.
All right. Any luck?
No.
Audience, help us out here. If you see my screen, let me know.
Are you able to make us a co-host?
We got you. It's still a black screen. We do apologize.
Okay. Crystal, will you open up the Word document I sent to Dr. Parker today with the frequently asked questions?
I can do that.
All right, everyone, we are going to pivot. There were about 15 questions you all sent in that I believe we will just address those questions since we are having issues with our Zoom sharing ability. Okay, I'm just closing.
Well, one of the questions with respect to Alzheimer's, and we only have 8 minutes, so we're not going to be doing this too long. We're going to let Dr. Rosen do it, present. One of the things that's really important to remember about Alzheimer's and related dementias is that dementia is the category, and underneath the category, almost like automobiles, there's several different types. The most commonly diagnosed dementia is Alzheimer's, followed by a mixed dementia, which can be Lewy body and vascular, or Alzheimer's and vascular, or even frontotemporal dementia. When you hear the word early onset Alzheimer's disease, that's not when you start to see symptoms. Early onset Alzheimer's disease, and it almost always has a strong genetic component, presents before you get to 65. So early onset Alzheimer's disease is when you present with the symptoms and get the diagnosis before the age of 65. So what is dementia? Okay, it's disordered thinking. It's something that doesn't go away. It can interfere with your daily activities of living, which are feeding, grooming, bathing, toileting, even financial things like managing your business, your ability to do your job, which is why it's important when people start to have difficulties remembering or understanding things, particularly if they're working, to get a proper diagnosis. Why? Because with early onset Alzheimer's, this is what Dr. Apostolova talked about last week, it becomes a medical disability and not a reason for being fired and losing all of your benefits. To that degree, it's really important for you to talk to your medical doctor and get an understanding about what's happening with you. We suffered the loss of anchor Jovita Moore this week, or last week rather. And she said that her problems were she was getting suddenly confused, she was having blurred vision, she was having all kinds of things happening to her that she didn't understand. We always tell people when there are things that look unusual and don't appear correct to you, you need to get to your medical doctor, discuss what you are seeing, and in consultation with that provider, they will come up with a plan for the proper diagnosis or evaluation of whatever it is you're looking at. Dementia is a broad term. There are several different types of dementia. The treatment that has been approved for treating Alzheimer's dementia is not appropriate for treating somebody who has vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia or frontotemporal dementia, or even the dementia that comes from having trauma to your brain. There are a number of different things that are risk factors for Alzheimer's and related dementias. Number one being hypertension. A 20-year history of high blood pressure that hasn't been controlled is a risk factor for vascular dementia. People who have heart disease, diabetes, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, hypercholesterolemia, those are all risk factors for vascular disease, but vascular disease is a strong risk for developing vascular dementia. That's the kind of dementia you get as a result of having a stroke. And all strokes aren't strokes that you've seen or have been diagnosed. They're kind of invisible. So as it relates to research, we don't always know what causes somebody to get Alzheimer's or another dementia. We do know that there is a genetic component that's involved, and we know we can't do anything about that. But improving our lifestyle, eating better, not smoking, doing all the things we can do to stay healthy and keep from developing a chronic disease makes it less likely that we're going to develop any type of dementia. So one of the questions, and this is pertinent to the next presentation, are my mom's parents and my mom had Alzheimer's. Will I get this? Well, I always like to say, let's be sure that they had Alzheimer's. If they did indeed have Alzheimer's and it was confirmed by an MRI and a lumbar puncture, cerebrospinal fluid, yes, you likely have the genetics that make it more likely that you'll get Alzheimer's. But what else was going on in that environment? Did you have hypertension? Did your parents, did your grandparents have any other chronic conditions? Okay, what is the likelihood of a parent, or if a parent has Alzheimer's, what are my likelihoods? What's the risk that I'm going to get Alzheimer's moving forward? Again, I'm going to defer to Dr. Rosen to talk about genetic inheritance, but if you had Alzheimer's, there's a genetic component. If you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, if you're morbidly obese, if you suffer from lots of chronic diseases that have not been well managed, that's not Alzheimer's. It's dementia, but it's not Alzheimer's. How can I reduce my chances of having Alzheimer's? Now, genetics is one thing. You are your genetics, but what is expressed is usually triggered by something else. In African Americans who contain the gene called ABCA7, that's a risk factor for Alzheimer's. ABCA7 gene turns on what we call the Alzheimer's cascade in the presence of poorly managed cardiovascular disease like high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So how can I be tested for DNA? And my mother went into the fetal position before she died at 84 and had to be turned every 2 hours. These are lots of questions, but I think your question has to do with inheritance. And again, there are more than 2 genes, ApoE4, ApoE3, ABCA7, and about 30 other different genes that are associated with the Alzheimer's disease diagnosis and that you can inherit. But just because those are your genes doesn't mean that those genes are necessarily going to be expressed. What you can do, again, is make sure that you manage your chronic illnesses. The high blood pressure, 20-year history of high blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease and irregular heartbeats all put you at risk for having strokes. And because we're in the South, we are at higher risk for strokes because of our lifestyle. We know that according to the Lancet Commission, 30% of all worldwide dementias could be prevented, if we did certain things. Among those things are maintaining an ideal body weight, eating a Mediterranean diet, exercising at least 150 minutes a week, maintaining social engagement, preventing social isolation, treating depression, which is one of the things that we screen for during the annual wellness visit. And if you're 65 years of age and above, you get an annual wellness visit every year. And it's not a physical, it's kind of like a checkoff. Other things you can do is manage things like hearing loss, manage things like sleep deprivation and sleep apnea. There are lots of things you can do to keep yourself healthy that make it less likely that you will turn on a gene that turns on the Alzheimer's cascade. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Amy Rosen, who is a genetics counselor and can talk to you a little bit more about the genetics of Alzheimer's and other inherited diseases. Dr. Rosen?
Hi there, everybody. So I am a genetic counselor. Thank you so much for having me here. I am so happy to talk to you about genetics of Alzheimer's and some of the ways to get tested, that sort of thing. And hopefully, let's see, can you see my slides now?
Looks great.
Awesome. Okay. So first of all, like I said, I'm a genetic counselor, have been practicing for about 20 years in neurology, as well as within genetics with lysosomal storage diseases and some other disorders. So I feel like I'm coming back to my roots here with Alzheimer's disease. This is where I started. So I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about just inheritance patterns, some of the things you guys have been asking in those questions that Dr. Parker was talking about, as far as if you have a family member who has Alzheimer's disease, am I at risk, or how do I get tested for it? I'm not going to talk a lot about specific genes today. As Dr. Parker alluded to, there's a lot of them that have something to do with Alzheimer's, but hopefully I'll give you a good feeling for the information. So I wanted to start out with kind of what's the most simple case within genetics for Alzheimer's disease, which is when we have generation after generation, doesn't matter if it's male or female, but generation after generation, we're having somebody have Alzheimer's disease. And it's from parent to child that we're seeing Alzheimer's disease, a parent and then their child, and then that person's children. And it's not everyone. It's usually about a 50% risk if a parent has one of these single genes that's actually causing the disease, then it's about a 50% risk for each of their children to have inherited that form of the gene that's going to cause them then to have Alzheimer's disease. So that's what we call a causal gene. And that inheritance pattern is what we call autosomal dominant, just to throw a term at you. That term's not terribly important at the moment. Another way that we know that genetics is involved with Alzheimer's disease is as a risk factor. So Dr. Parker mentioned the ApoE gene, and there are 3 different forms of the ApoE gene. Some people have ApoE2, and they've got 2 of those. Some people have ApoE4, and they've got 2 of those. The form of ApoE that is ApoE4 is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. But what we see generation after generation is not necessarily a parent and then children having it, and then it's in every generation. It doesn't skip. As you can see kind of here in this image I've made, it can skip a generation. It's only a risk factor, which means it's not enough in and of itself to cause the disease. And so we may see it in this first generation in one person, and then we'll see it pop up in the family if we're looking out kind of to aunts and uncles and cousins. We may see other people with Alzheimer's, but it's not necessarily showing up in every generation from parent to child like that. And it may skip a whole generation where we just don't see anything, because that person that generation, the people that were in that generation did not have enough other risk factors. So they didn't have high blood pressure or depression or other genes that are also interacting in our bodies with the ApoE gene and causing a big enough risk for the disease to actually show up. Okay, so a risk factor is very different from a causal gene. And it gives us, if we're doing genetic testing, much less information. Okay, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But also, just to round out the inheritance patterns, we've got sporadic. Oh, and I should say that with the risk factor, we usually call that familial inheritance. And that accounts for about 25% of people who have Alzheimer's disease. We see 3 or more people throughout the generations that have Alzheimer's disease. And that single gene causal, that's only about 5% of people who have Alzheimer's disease. So you can see that when we have any types of genetic testing, it's only for a small percentage of people who have Alzheimer's disease that we're going to find an answer for the Alzheimer's disease in those families. Okay, a genetic answer. And then we have sporadic, which is there may be only one person in the family who has Alzheimer's disease, maybe 2. And that's it. And they may be in different generations. They may be parent and child, but they may not be. It's just 2 people within a family or 1. And we call that sporadic because there's not any known gene or big risk factor that we can pinpoint in that family. There's no real pattern. Okay, so those are the different inheritance patterns that we see with Alzheimer's disease. So to talk a little bit more about that causal gene, that single gene that is enough when it is in a certain form where it has a mutation or a variant in it that is causing Alzheimer's disease. In those 5% of people with Alzheimer's that have that type of reason for their Alzheimer's disease. And some of the genes I've listed up here, the ones that we've known about for quite some time, there are genetic tests for them. If your family member or you have Alzheimer's disease and you want genetic testing, I recommend speaking with your doctor. They may send you for genetic counseling. They may order the test themselves. But the genetic testing in a family where a single gene causing the disease is suspected should always be done on the person who has symptoms. That is of utmost importance, okay? Because if you don't do it in the person who has symptoms and identify a causal gene, then if anyone else gets tested, they may be negative for all the genes that we can test that are causal single gene reasons for Alzheimer's disease, but we don't know if it was the reason for Alzheimer's in their family. Okay, so and that is tough because sometimes we don't think about it or it wasn't available when the person in the family had Alzheimer's disease and was living. And that is something that I'll talk about in a moment also. But in those cases, people can get genetic testing, but it's not terribly informative if they don't find a causal gene. If they do, then we have some information. But if they don't, we're not able to say if that's what was causing, if we looked for the right thing, if that's what was causing Alzheimer's in the family. So if they do the genetic testing on someone in the family who has Alzheimer's disease, and they find a variant that is causing Alzheimer's disease in that gene, then you can test other people in the family that do not have symptoms to find out if they have that variation in their, for example, presenilin 1 gene that is going to cause Alzheimer's disease in them or not. So that's what we call predictive testing because the person doesn't have symptoms, but they can get testing because we know what gene causes Alzheimer's disease in their family. Okay. So risk factors, which are not, like I said, they're not causal on their own. So we do see them within the family. We'll see Alzheimer's disease within the family. And like I said, an example of that is ApoE. It increases the risk for someone to develop Alzheimer's disease, but it doesn't cause Alzheimer's disease all by itself. There have to be other genes that ApoE or another risk factor gene is interacting with within that person, or there are other environmental factors, things that we're exposed to, stressors, and other things that are interacting with our bodies and causing us the risk to rise until it reaches a point where we're going to present symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Again, speaking with your doctor is a great first step. Getting genetic counseling, if you can, for Alzheimer's is an excellent idea. And then testing people who have symptoms may help with a diagnosis in certain instances. If there's a questionable diagnosis, a doctor may decide that that would be helpful to them to see if they have 2 ApoE4 genes, for example. But testing for a risk factor for people who do not have symptoms is not recommended. There are actually guidelines against it right now. And that's because we can't give someone a great estimate. It's not a good predictor of risk on its own. We can't do an ApoE test and say, your risk of Alzheimer's is 30% or is 30% higher than population risk. We can do that to a point, but it's not a great predictor on its own of risk. We do have some numbers, but they're not great. Okay. So if you have sporadic Alzheimer's in your family where 1 or 2 people have it, but it's not a pattern of any case, and there's really nobody else other than those 1 or 2 people, or if you fall into either familial or that autosomal dominant pattern, but a genetic cause can't be found in that family, I suggest DNA banking. Okay. It's a secure storage of DNA for future use. If the person who has Alzheimer's disease, like I said, they're the best person to get tested. So if they are no longer here, if they have passed away, and then we have better testing available, their DNA can be taken from a DNA bank by an authorized representative, and the person who had Alzheimer's can determine who that is, or after they've passed, there are legal standards for who that person is. Then they can get that DNA tested, and they can find out, once there is better testing and we better understand how all of the genes and environment work together, then we can get that DNA tested and have a better answer for the family. So I strongly always recommend DNA banking for families, whether it's sporadic or not, if they are curious and want that type of information, to wait until we have a better test available. Okay. If you're interested in pursuing some genetic testing now, or want to talk to somebody about genetic testing, these are 2 resources that I would recommend. The first one is the Southeast Regional Genetics Network, and that's short for, it's called CERN. And the link is here, but the website is down below there, southeastgenetics.org, and if we can put that in the chat as well. And that is a website that has a great deal of genetics resources for everyone within the Southeast region. If you're not within the Southeast region, there are other genetics networks that are federally funded that will have this type of network of resources on a website as well. So for example, there's the Heartland network. There are others. So if you are not in the Southeast region, you can just look up your genetics network online. And then if you're in Georgia, you're in Atlanta, the Emory General Genetics Group is available and does have an adult geneticist and genetic counselors who can talk to you about this as well. So I've put their phone number and their link down there as well. It's much longer as far as a link. Yes, Dr. Parker.
People, a lot of the questions in chat are about who should get tested, and you just went through and gave a beautiful explanation. People with symptoms should get tested, and if there's a causal gene, then maybe. you think about it. But
Yes.
the question that I have is people want to know about genetics testing. And can you tell people how genetics testing is funded? I mean, does your insurance, just because you want a genetics test, does your insurance pay for it?
Is a great question. So for people who have Alzheimer's disease, yes, insurance will typically pay for it. A good practice is you can call your insurance company beforehand, but the genetics laboratories are very well practiced in this. So if they get a sample, the first thing that they do is they call the insurance company and they make sure that it's going to be covered. And if not, many of the genetics companies do have a cap on what they will charge someone out of pocket. Okay, but if insurance will not cover it, then they contact the patient or their family, whatever contact information has been put on the order form, and they will ask them, is it okay to go forward with the testing? It will cost you $200 out of pocket or $400 out of pocket. That's the typical range for if it's going to be out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover it. As far as for people who do not have symptoms, for family members where a mutation or risk factor that is high importance has been found, and the people who do not have symptoms want to get tested, insurance is unlikely to cover that. Because the way, at least in the US, the way our insurance is set up, mostly what insurance covers is medically necessary treatments and tests. And it can be argued for someone who's symptomatic that this test is necessary for their diagnosis and therefore treatment. But for someone who wants it predictively, there's no imminent medical need for it. So typically insurance will not cover that, and then it is out of pocket. And like I said, usually somewhere in the range of $200 to $400, depending upon which laboratory you're using and which test you're having done. If there's a familial mutation, it's really just about $250 usually.
Amy, can I ask you to repeat the telephone number for Emory General Genetics?
Yes,
There are people who are on the phone and they're not looking at the screen.
absolutely. The number for Emory General Genetics is 404-778-8570. That's 404-778-8570. And the website for CERN is southeastgenetics.org. So those are our two great resources. I did want to take a moment to talk about direct-to-consumer testing, because that is something that people often say, well, that's available to me. I don't even need to go to the doctor. It's not that expensive. I get all this other information also. Why shouldn't I do it? Or should I do it? My answer as a professional would be no, you shouldn't do it. And now I'll tell you why. So when we're looking at direct-to-consumer testing, not all genetic testing is created equal. And what direct-to-consumer testing does is they take a bird's eye view of the genes, all the genes. So if I look at this picture that I put up here, I know that it's Manhattan. I know that I'm looking at Central Park and I see some lakes there. I can see that. That's good detail for me. That's what direct-to-consumer testing is usually doing in comparison to clinical genetics that hones in on the lake in Central Park. So I can no longer see that I'm in Manhattan, except that I know that this lake is in Manhattan, right? So that is something that as a clinical genetics test, we know where we're looking. I'm looking in Manhattan at a lake in Manhattan. And what I can see is that there's a fountain, there are X number of bushes, there are Y number of lily pads. I can see a lot of detail. And I can report on that detail and give a person individualized information about what I saw in their gene, or in this case, in their pond. Okay, so there's a big, big difference between how direct-to-consumer testing and clinical genetic testing is looking at the genetic material. All right, so that's kind of the biggest difference. I've listed a bunch of pros and cons here between direct-to-consumer genetic testing and clinical genetic testing. The big pros for clinical genetic testing are that you get to consult with an expert, a doctor, a genetic counselor, who's going to then explain all of the results to you, as well as the pros and cons of the particular tests that you're interested in. The cost is typically $200 or up, like I said, and sometimes the insurance will cover it. The labs are inspected and certified, and they have to be in order to practice. They are not seen as a clinical genetic test lab if they are not inspected and federally certified. They, like I was showing with that picture, they give a very detailed inspection of the genes that are in question, and the results are individual interpretations. They give you, for ApoE, you're either at an increased risk, normal, general population risk, or decreased risk, slightly decreased. Or we're looking at single genes like APP and presenilin 1, where it's, yes, you have a mutation that's going to cause a disease. No, you don't have a mutation that causes the disease. Or, unfortunately, there are some what we call variants of unknown significance, where we say, we see a variant, we don't know if it just causes a disease. We haven't seen it in enough people yet to know. Come back in a few years, we might be able to tell you more about that variant. So there is a little bit of unknown left there, but we're learning more and more every day. And we don't sell data that's used clinically. Whereas for direct-to-consumer genetic testing, yes, you can order it on your own. That's a big pro. The costs are about $100 or maybe a little bit more, depending upon which service you're using and how much you want. It can be done by anyone. It is, like I said, a con is that it's the bird's eye view. So they're not specifically looking at the genes. They're looking at some areas within the genetic material, and they have found associations with that, with those markers that they're looking at. And so they can tell you a risk. Yes, it's a higher risk, it's a lower risk. They're not always right. And different companies, sorry, couldn't think of the word, may give you different answers. They may give you different risk numbers. So they're not quite there yet as far as being able to give you great numbers. And it's also not always clinically important. So this was just an example of, they may tell you that it's a 30% increase in risk over general population, but the population risk is 1% and your risk is now 1.3%. It's not a huge increase in risk, but it's 30%. So it's a big number when they present it that way, but it's not a clinically important number. And they do sell some data for profit, and for that's just part of the business model. So those I would see as cons. And I did see a couple of hands raised, but that I just wanted to thank you all for having me. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know if we have time. Let me see.
Amy, there are several questions in there that I did not answer. I left it just for you. Some of the questions you did answer. It's what's the percentage of people who have a genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's? I think it's 5% is what you quoted. But the other questions are, is frontotemporal dementia and is Parkinson's hereditary?
So frontotemporal dementia, like Alzheimer's disease, has some genes that are associated with it. It has some genes that seem to cause it outright. One single gene with a mutation in it can cause frontotemporal dementia. There are risk factors as well for frontotemporal dementia. So that same picture that I had at the beginning, where there can be a single causal gene, there can be risks, and there can be sporadic, is also true of frontotemporal dementia. The same genes, for the most part, do not cross over between the two. There are a couple that do, but they tend to have their own genes that risk either for frontotemporal dementia or for Alzheimer's disease. And I don't have percentages for frontotemporal dementia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They're asking also about just genetic testing. You know, what does that process look like, or that experience?
Sure.
You're talking about the different standards, but also what's the turnaround for results?
That is excellent questions. So genetic testing can be done on blood. It used to be done on blood all the time. We can now do it as a saliva sample. We get a little tube and you just spit, spit, spit. And what that's doing is it's taking the cells from your cheeks, from the insides of your cheeks. And when we spit, some of those cells are coming off with your saliva into the tube. And we can do DNA testing or genetic testing on that now. Or we can do a buccal swab where we take, it looks like a big Q-tip, and we just kind of rub it on the inside of your mouth. And we put that in a tube and that gets tested. And that has the same thing. It has the cells from the inside of your cheek, which tend to be very loose. So they come off without an awful lot of work. Just spitting is enough to kind of help them come off. So we collect that sample, whether it's blood or cheek cells through spit, or buccal sample is what that Q-tip is called. We send that off to specialized genetics laboratories. And then, like I said, the lab will go ahead and check insurance, or if you're paying privately, they'll take care of that. And then they will run the sample. And unlike a lot of other medical tests where you're used to, you go to the doctor, you have a physical, and you get your cholesterol and blood sugar levels back within 24 hours, right? You get them back very quickly. Genetic tests don't move that quickly. There's a lot of moving parts to it. So typically it takes somewhere between 10 to 14 days for genetic test results to come back. Usually the practitioner, whoever ordered it, will then call you and give you the results. Sometimes they want to have an appointment to give you the results. It really depends on how complex and how complicated the test that you had done was, and what the results look like and what the implications were for you. So some of it has to do with the reasons for getting tested, how they'll want to give you the results. And then they'll talk about next steps, whether it's predictive, and we're talking about insurance or financial planning, which is one of the reasons to talk to a genetic counselor before you get tested, because sometimes, especially for predictive testing, you want to consider and get some of those things in place beforehand. We also talk about family planning. Genetic counselors are all trained to talk about different options for family planning, be it adoption, natural conception, prenatal genetic diagnosis, prenatal testing. There's all different kinds of options that we would go through and talk about with the families when it comes to predictive testing, or if something is found within a family, a gene mutation is found within a family. Hope that answers some of that. What companies are considered DTC? I see that question. That would be things like 23andMe or Ancestry. And then there's a bunch of companies that kind of work off of them also. Can't think of it.
DTC means direct to consumer. So that's
Yes.
Ancestry. What is it? Ancestry.
Ancestry and 23andMe are the two biggest ones. Yeah.
And your recommendation is don't.
For ApoE testing, yes, right, and for direct-to-consumer testing. For direct-to-consumer, my recommendation is don't. We're not there yet. It's not refined enough. It's not good enough to give you good information. And if you did get any information, you took it to your doctor, they're going to want to do the clinical testing to confirm, because sometimes that happens. We do it, we confirm, we do the test, and it's not confirmed. It is found that there was indeed no mutation, or you're not at an increased risk for Alzheimer's or for whatever disease it is that was looked at.
Yeah, that's really a big problem for a lot of people, just like Prevagen. People always say, can I take Prevagen? Is it going to protect my brain? It's going to protect somebody else's bank account. So Ancestry.
Yes. Do it for fun if you want. I mean, do it for fun. It tells you all kinds of fun things, but
it's not gospel.
But don't use it for medical purposes. Yeah, it's not there yet. It's not good enough.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosen. That was a very good presentation. We're going to, for everybody who's listening, we have recorded this, and next week when we send out the announcement for next week's talk, you will have access to the YouTube link for Dr. Rosen's talk. Thank you, because we get a lot of questions on genetics and is this inherited? Should I get tested? I was so glad to hear you say No, the person who has the disease has to get tested. And if that person has a causal gene, it may be necessary to check. Like for BRCA with breast cancer, that's different, right?
That is different. Yes, that is different. Also, it's different because there are screening recommendations if you are at an increased risk for breast cancer. And right now, there are no screenings that we have or medical interventions that we would recommend for someone based on an ApoE status, for example. So that is different than a BRCA test for breast cancer risk.
Again, thank you so much, Dr. Rosen, for your time and for the 270 some people that I saw who tuned in. You gave us an awful lot of information. At this time, there are going to be other things. There's a question in the chat about what are the YouTube studies. Crystal is putting in who you should call and what email you should use to get into our studies here. I've put some information in the question and answer about BioHermes study, which does a PET scan and neurocognitive testing that they make available to you. It is a research study. The PET scan that Dr. Rosen referred to, and I've mentioned before, is not paid for by your insurance or Medicare. It's the only FDA approved diagnostic tool, and to get into most of the drug trials, clinical drug trials in the country, you have to have a positive PET scan or positive cerebrospinal fluid. So thank you, Dr. Rosen. At this time, I think we're moving to Matt. Thank you, Dr. Rosen.
Hi, everyone. So in a few minutes, we're going to be have our CEP Community Live webinar. In a moment, I'll post the link to register for our event. Today, we are joined by Dr. Felicia Goldstein. She's going to be talking about cardiovascular disease and other types of vascular factors that can affect cognition in regards to mild cognitive impairment and other types of dementia. So if you're interested in that and hearing more about that, please let us know. Another one thing we like to talk about here in BrainTalk Live and CEP Community Live is it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain, and that's definitely going to be something we're going to be talking about today. So hope to see you all there. Please take a look and chat if you haven't registered.
Thank you, Matt. And just to clarify, if you are new to our program and you haven't, this is your first or second time joining us, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center has many programs, as you can see. We're a research center, but we also have other educational opportunities such as this platform, BrainTalk Live, as well as the program Matt just mentioned, which is our Cognitive Empowerment Program. And that is a different link. They are using Zoom, but it's a different link. So if you have already registered for that specific program, you're good to go at 3 o'clock. You can go ahead and head over there and join them. If you have not registered and you're interested in hearing from Dr. Goldstein, which is a treat, she's a neuropsychologist, you want to join and grab that link in the chat, and you will be required to register. There are two separate platforms, but every Tuesday at 2 p.m., we are here for BrainTalk Live, and then the CEP program with our center begins their event at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay? All right. Well, that's all we have. It is almost 3. It's 1 minute away from 3 p.m. We'll give you a little bit of time to grab all of those links, all of those telephone numbers, and remember to check your email where we will include additional links as well as a PDF of the presentation from today. Okay? All right. Thanks for joining.